That subprime mortgage situation was, of course, reared on a substructure of grotesque exploitation and preying on the poorer and most hard-hit economic sections of the population of the American working class, who were given loans and services at far higher interest and charges than better off citizens of the United States. And on top of that was reared then the superstructure of all kinds of products, selling those debts to financial institutions, which made a massive killing for them, where we had all kinds of fancy products that the layperson like myself and many people here would probably be at great pains to understand: collateralized mortgage obligations, securitization, etc., called financial debt vehicles, financial products, in other words, that were then traded and sold and bought between the major institutions. And of course, internationally, this was not carried out by a few cowboy outfits in the United States, for example, but all the most prestigious so-called financial institutions worldwide were up to their necks in the packaging, the selling and the trading of this junk, including institutions that regarded themselves in the financial world as the eagles of the financial world. But when you examine what they were in fact down with the barnyard fowl, grubbing around for what could be got in the subprime market. Now, inevitably, that turned into the situation of toxic debt, which has infected the entire world financial situation. Meanwhile, back at the ranch in old Ireland, of course, at the same time, our very own cowboys were busy constructing the Irish version of that toxic minefield, where they pushed speculation in building land and in property and in housing construction in particular to a situation where an incredible 20% of the gross product was accounted for by construction, as opposed to 6 or 7% as the normal for the European Union, which meant that over a period of years, taxes and public finances became hugely dependent on a massive and increasing bubble of speculation and borrowing, workers borrowing to the hilt to provide a basic human need, a home for themselves, but speculators borrowing from their accomplices in the banks, and intoxicated with the idea that this bonanza that was reaping them such massive rewards could go on forever. And so we had 10 years of the most shameful exploitation, speculation and profiteering in property, in housing that, as we know, has shackled a generation now to mortgages of 30, 35 and 40 years, making a massive, unmentionable profits for a handful of developers and the big banks. Even more serious than that, of course, was the fact that they grotesquely skewed and distorted the Irish economy to a dependence on speculation and on construction to a huge extent, with, of course, the main party of government at that time, Fianna Fáil, deeply involved with the speculators, often, I've no doubt, corruptly involved with the speculators, but they have been in the pockets of the speculators for 40 years. So the speculators found a willing accomplice in government to facilitate and legislate for this racketeering that went on. Now, I don't really have time to go into that much, but Jim might elucidate a little bit himself and his own view of this as it unfolded. I did find some quotes from Jim from 2006, for example, where he was advocating caution that the construction sector the economy was too dependent upon it. I see that the Sunday Independent columnist Gene Kerrigan had some similar quotes from Jim Power from 2004, where he was advocating caution and pointing out, indeed, as we ourselves did at the time, the dangers that were inherent in this bubble that was being built. But then Gene Kerrigan then goes on to berate Jim for remarks he made in 2007, which I wasn't able to unearth, but Jim can elucidate, for example, by himself, at a round-table discussion where he said we had a solidly based market, predicting no hard landing and demanding less regulation in financial factors. Jim can elucidate on that. But moving forward to where we are at the present time in regard to the Friends First document and their prescription for the solution to the crisis. Can anybody seriously suggest that the reinvention, as in Jim's words, of the Irish economy should be on the basis of the Washington Consensus, should be on the basis of precisely the very factors that over the last 30 years have exacerbated the normal crisis of capitalism to the level of this massive global disaster that has now befallen the system at the present time. Privatisation is another leg of the neoliberal stool, and that was of course pushed relentlessly in this country by Fianna Fáil and the Progressive Democrats since 1997. But privatisation, which again is pushed by the Friends First, has been a disaster for the Irish economy. Now Jim himself correctly says in his document, for example, with regard to what is a direct failure of privatisation, he said the failure to deliver a high-speed broadband capability around the Irish economy is a national disgrace. We absolutely agree. But the reason that that happened was, of course, because Fianna Fáil and the PDs handed over our telecom infrastructure to multinational corporations who speculated, sweated the assets and profiteered on it, and didn't, of course, put in the infrastructure that would be needed now at the level that is needed at the present time. And look at SR Technics, the aircraft maintenance operation at Dublin Airport, where 1,150 workers, including 60 apprentices, have been sacked summarily on orders from Zurich, which is the headquarters of SR Technics, but dictated by billionaire sheikhs in the Gulf states who own that company, at a time when the order books of that company have been full for the next 3 years with aircraft lined up to be serviced at Dublin Airport. Now, this is an utter disaster. Could it have been foreseen? And I just want to refer here to the 27th of November 1997, when I was myself a rookie TD, you could say, in the Dáil, only 5 months, when the first wind came down of a management buyout of Team Aer Lingus, which was publicly owned by the state at that particular time. And I demanded that the Minister for Public Enterprise, Mary O'Rourke, come into the Dáil. This was the first time that this was mooted. And I said the following, and I want to quote it a little bit of length, and I do so not to show any insight or prescience on my behalf, which wasn't there, but to really say that we just had a very basic socialist understanding of what privatisation would mean in regard to this particular enterprise. So I said to the Minister, the privatisation proposal of Team Aer Lingus is utter treachery against a premier publicly owned company of strategic importance, a dedicated workforce whose skills and commitment have made this company a top quality aircraft maintenance firm. Let us make no mistake, if they get away with it, whichever multinational giant comes in will have loyalty to one thing only, maximisation of their profit, and if that means moving the business out of Dublin to the United States or somewhere else, that is what will be done, without thought for Irish jobs, Irish workers or North Dublin. When the Asian flu, now convulsing the Sikh tigers in the east, remember the Asian tigers before the Celtic tiger, inevitably spreads to the west, which it will even if it takes years, maximisation of profits and new strategies will mean that these foreign multinational corporations will abandon this country and the Dublin workers. Now, I think that that couldn't spell it out more clearly. Unfortunately, is precisely what has happened to the present time. So by privatisation, the country is giving away its ability to control, in this case, 1,150 premier jobs and a very hugely necessary facility of aircraft maintenance going into the future. Now, so liberalisation and deregulation is giving unelected corporations and financial giants control over critical resources in our society, with the capitalist marketplace, which is the fairground, if you like, or the fair field, where they can buy and sell and gamble and speculate as it suits, making that the dominant factor in how our economy is run. And this is the market, by the way, that is never off the lips of the economists, of broadcasters, of right-wing media pundits, etc. Every assault that has been made on the public services by the government over the past period of time, every cut, for example, everything that has been done for the banks, the question that is asked by them, is it enough for the markets? But will the markets be happy? Will it be enough to satisfy the markets? We have a new God created by the commentators and the advocates of Irish and international capitalism, the market. And these are people who consider themselves democrats. But what is democratic about the market, which dictates at the stroke of a pen, by unelected and faceless men and women, that thousands of workers should lose their jobs and that services should be slashed in that particular way?